Добрый день, глубоко уважаемые.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, dear guests, let me start the Dissertation Council session of Beliaeva Tatiana Beliaeva to seeking the degree of Candidate of Economic Sciences in the degree field Economics and the Management. And the topic is strategic orientations and performance of Russian small and medium-sized enterprises during the economic crisis. I would like to declare this session officially open, and I am the professor of Doctor of Economic Sciences, Professor of the Department of Strategic and International Management of St. Petersburg State University. Andrei Yurievich Panibratov has been appointed the Chairman of the Dissertation Council. Also with me working on this council is Tatiana Albertovna Gavrilova, Doctor of Technical Sciences, Head of Department of Information Technologies and in Management, St. Petersburg State University, Yelena Moiseyevna Rogova, Doctor of Economic Sciences, Dean of the Faculty of St. Petersburg School of Economics and Management and National Research University High School of Economics, Marina Yurievna Sheresheva, Doctor of Economic Sciences, Professor of the Department of Applied Institutional Economics, Head of the Laboratory of Institutional Analysis of Moscow State University, named after Lomonosov, and also on a remote mode we have Sergei Alexandrovich Anokhin, Doctor of Philosophy, Professor of the College of Business Administration, Kent State University, the United States. I would like to say that according to the federal law dated 23rd of August 1996 on science and state policy in the scientific and technical field, St. Petersburg State University was granted the right to grant its own degrees. And therefore, St. Petersburg State University issued an act by law to this extent that regulates this procedure. In accordance with this act, the session of Dissertation Council is legitimate if not less than 3/3 of the approved composition of Dissertation Council, but not fewer than 4 people are present. And our Dissertation Council consists of 5 members. All members are present, and 1 member is on Skype connection with us. And I would like to state the procedure that we're going to work according to. The short presentation of the chairman about the core issues of the core paperwork that were presented by the defendant in accordance with stipulated requirement, and all possible answers to possible questions. Then a short presentation of the defendant seeking the degree, covering the main statements of the dissertation. Also the next questions to the defendant on the presentation, but not more than 2 minutes per question, and answers of the defendant. Also, then reviewers. Reviewers will read out their reviews that are uploaded on the university website or comment. And also, we have all members of the Dissertation Council have 10 minutes per their review, and 10 minutes for their presentation. Then the defendant has time of not more than 15 minutes to answer these questions and criticism. Then the floor is open for discussion, question and answer session. Anyone who has registered to speak can speak for not more than 5 minutes per remark. And then after that, the defendant will answer questions that he received. Then the the academic advisor will have 3 minutes to present, so then 5 minutes before the open voting, and then and for this debate, deliberation, the broadcast will be switched off, and then after that, open voting and the count of the vote. And I would like to say that this session is broadcast, and the interpretation into Russian and into English is provided. I would like to now proceed to my own remarks. The dissertation of Beliaeva, Tatiana Vasilyevna, seeking the degree of candidate of economic sciences in the degree field economics and management, on the topic of strategic orientations and performance of Russian small and medium-sized enterprises during economic crisis, was accepted for a defense on the 18th January 2018. And I would like to mention now all the documents that have been submitted by the defendant. First of all, the personal statement of addressed to the rector of St. Petersburg State University, dated 07 November 2017. Then a review of the academic advisor, professor of the Department of Strategic and International Management, St. Petersburg State University, Shirokova, and then the list of publications that consists of 8 works, where key issues that are covered in the dissertation are deliberated on, including three papers that are published in the journals that are approved by the Ministry of Education of the Russian Federation, and 3 articles in Scopus journals. Also, there's a certificate on studies, and the studies was during the period from 1 September 2014 to 13th of August 2018. And then the statement also includes the information that 3 candidate of sciences exams have been passed. The first one is the history of philosophy of science. Second is English. The third is special discipline economics and management. All of them the defendant received excellent marks for all of them. Then there's a review on that states that the dissertation is recommended, that has been approved by the Vice Rector for Academic Affairs, Sergei Aplonov, and then there's a copy of the diploma, of the master's degree diploma, St. Petersburg State University, that was issued to Beliaeva on the 19th of June 2014. In management, there's a copy of diploma on the completion of the postgraduate course in St. Petersburg State University, dated 29th June 2017, and the qualification that was awarded as in economics. The dissertation in Russian and in English, both in hard copy and in soft copy. Also, both copies comply with the requirements of St. Petersburg State University and state requirements. I would like to also say that everything that I've mentioned complies with the requirements of St. Petersburg State University, and now I'd like to give the floor to the defendant.
Distinguished colleagues, I would like to urge you to review my dissertation under the title Strategic Orientation and Performance of the Russian Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises During the Economic Crisis. submitted in conformity with the requirements for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy Economics. My dissertation was created under the supervision of Doctor of Economic Sciences, Professor Shirokova. Today, we see that the landscape is highly competitive and very flexible. Therefore, performance of small and medium businesses is key. So this ability to perform successfully is demonstrated especially amid economic crisis. Most vulnerable are small and medium businesses to crisis, because quite often those lack resources and are very unsustainable to changes. Today, managers have to follow a specific strategy so as to boost performance of their companies, which is, these strategies are called strategic orientations. The key strategic orientations are entrepreneurship, market orientation, and learning orientation. So the key dimension of strategic orientation is their relation with the company performance. However, the academic tradition looks at only one type of management orientations, which does not allow us to arrive at any objective conclusions. But what's more, this research is done amid stability context. Therefore, we are compelled to study crisis as a potential context in this respect. Amid economic crisis, strategic orientations promote performance, and it is yet unsolved which strategic orientations promote performance, and this makes the topic of my dissertation highly relevant. So my dissertation looks at three types of strategic orientations that look into various dimensions of strategic management. Entrepreneurial firms are usually demonstrate innovations. They search for new market opportunities and they're ready to take risks, whereas market-orientated companies focus on customer demands and competitor strategies, as well as exchange of information within all departments of companies so as to conform to the demands of the market. Learning-oriented companies are usually committed to learning. They have similar goals and targets and a similar vision. They are also critical in their evaluation. They're also open to new ideas. The topic of my dissertation is the theoretical justification and empirical assessment of the relation between strategic orientations and the performance of Russian small and medium companies. The object of my research are Russian small and medium firms. The subject of the research are strategic orientation and their relation to the company performance. The academic tradition has developed the concept of strategic orientation for quite a long time. My analysis allowed me to identify three stages in this analysis. The first stage is conceptualization of strategic orientations, which implies that the entrepreneurial concept, the market concept, and the learning concept emerge, as well as tools and metrics to measure performance. The contextualization of strategic orientations demonstrates a growing number of empirical research, as well as their antecedents, and the company performance, judging by the specific contingencies. And lastly, the configuration of strategic orientations, which brings together several types of strategic orientations under one umbrella model. As a result of a systematic literature review and the analysis of 79 papers, I have identified the following aspects. One of these aspects is the individual effect of strategic orientations and their influence on firm performance. This allowed us to interpret various strategic orientations as alternative factors to achieve various performance parameters, both financial and non-financial ones, or equally, those can be implied internally as well as externally. The other aspect is the joint impact of strategic orientations on company performance. This aspect looks into how various strategic orientations interact. I noted that several strategic orientations could enhance a company's performance largely. In empirical research, in my dissertation, is a response to the demand for an integrative approach based on theoretical approaches as well as empirical data. To this end, I developed an evidence-based model bringing together individual and generalized effects, such as availability of resources, financial capital being one of the most flexible resources to deliver on strategic challenges. As a result, I came up with 5 hypotheses. The context of my research is the economic crisis in Russia, which resulted in a slowdown of all economic proxies. The key proxies are indicated in the table. According to the Federal Statistics Service, in 2015, the GDP growth reduced by 2.8%, whereas the Russian currency devaluated twice, and the inflation being over 13%. Amid this crisis, businesses suffered huge impact. Most vulnerable were such industries as wholesale and retail, construction, processing, and services. The empirical research was based on the analysis of evidence and the data of a survey obtained from September 2015 to February 2016. My analysis was comprehensive. It was based on a random sampling. The sampling included Russian small and medium-sized companies across various industries and regions of the country, overall 599 companies. I used only reliable approaches, and I checked the measures for their sustainability and consistency. The analysis of data was done by way of factor and regression analysis. The results were verified by way of robustness tests and specific alternative tests to measure variabilities. The results of the empirical research show that there is a huge difference across individual impacts of strategic orientations. I identified that entrepreneurship and market orientation have a positive impact on company activities, with the former being stronger than the latter. What's more, I also identified a negative cumulative effect of each particular orientation, which means that the benefits of each orientation reduce while the company is getting more focused on a different orientation. And this manifests that these two parameters are closely interrelated. As for the financial potential, I also identified the opportunities for companies to benefit from, provided those are learning-oriented companies. The results can be justified by way of several theoretical approaches. According to the resource-based concept, strategic orientations are a specific ability of a company which is closely related to its performance and compels company to invest more resources for development. If a company is very well tailored to the landscape, it is important to have a balance across various strategic orientations, resources, and risk-taking, which may largely impact the ultimate outcome. The liability of smallness concept is also highly crucial because it can impact the ability of company to combine several strategic orientations at a time. The results of my research were justified and verified against the Russian context. And I found out that the implementation of various strategic orientations depends on various factors. And there is a huge promise to study this dimension in the future. The key results of my dissertation develop the theoretical grounds of the strategic orientation concept in such concepts as resource-based concept, liability of smallness concept. I developed the specific timeline, the classification, and the particular interconnections between strategic orientations and small and medium-sized companies' performance in Russia. What's more, the results also ensure better tools to study company performance amid crisis, as well as their strategic behavior in such context. The results of my dissertation could be functional and practical for heads of businesses and administrators of companies that find themselves amid crisis, as well as for public officials to develop specific companies to support small and medium-sized businesses. The key findings of my dissertation have been discussed at the meetings of the Strategic and International Management Department at St. Petersburg State Universities, as well as at top Russian and international conferences. The results of the dissertation are published in several articles, including 4 included in the Scopus database. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. You've been under the limit of 15 minutes. Dear colleagues, if you have any questions for the defendant, 2 minutes per question, please. Do you have any questions? Yes, please. Professor Gavrilova. Tatiana Beliaeva, would you like to comment? So you've talked about strategic orientation during a crisis. How would your results change if the context would be different? If the same model in the context of stability, the results could have changed. Well, in terms of strategic orientations, well, there was an negative effect in crisis. So companies tended to develop one strategic orientation at the expense of others, and instability. The research showed that companies developed two strategic orientations simultaneously. This strategy yielded better results, so there was a synergy there. So that's the difference between crisis and crisis context and the stable context. Could you show slide number 11, please? So I quote this question: what do you have negative synergy? We talk about institutional situation, market situation. What specific factors, the barriers in the emerging market? Whether depending on the phase. In terms of the barriers, we can talk about the access to finances, to funding. One barrier is this is one of the most difficult ones for SMEs. And in the context of crisis, these barriers, if we compare it with a stable situation, this barrier, any barriers intensify in the crisis conditions, and they impede the innovation activity and other types of activity of a company. And another thing I would like to say about theoretical model. What is the role of your theoretical model vis-a-vis human capital? Financial resources are the most flexible resources compared with other resources, and so this financial resource is included. But the human capital is included is because at the startup phase you have this resource, but less of any other resources. If you talk about other types of capital, we also tested them in the model, but they yielded less considerable results. Thank you very much. Professor Rogova, please. I have two questions about the results that you showed here in one slide. So what do you mean under the results of an SME company? And this station, this is net profit. Usually, why don't you use this? In this study, the results are subjective. This is the perception of the CEO. Is the results, the performance, and of course they also include they are included like net profit, etc. But they were subdued by the crisis. The model also included the results, empirical results, objective empirical results that we received, and and with the subjective ones was used because the scale was developed to assess the activity of the companies in a crisis situation, and the idea was to compare the performance. The goal was not to compare the performance of different companies, but to see how the performance is affected by crisis. Well, when a company decides to choose a strategy, an orientation, well, we have independent variables of company performance within a particular period of time. Well, later we can talk about. We use the period of 1 year, 2016, and therefore we cover some longitude aspect, and maybe we should take an extended period of time and later study. I have a question. Did I understand correctly that the financial resources is analyzed both in the orientation to education? That is pronounced when the education orientation is low. When the orientation to education is not related so much to the performance of the company. The results are in the configuration of the situation here is a low education orientation. If the financial capital is high, then the orientation to market orientation is higher. Does it mean that company performance will be lower if the financial resources are spent on the orientation to education, and so you have to rather than market orientation? Do you mean that the two orientations cannot be used simultaneously? But well, my answer is if the company orients at education, it will lead to a low performance with this configuration. How would you explain that? If we take educational orientation in comparison with the other orientations, in a crisis situation, not very many companies take that orientation. They usually use the baggage, the education baggage, knowledge baggage that they have already. And because we talk about young companies up to 6 years old, And so education orientation is not doesn't boost results of company performance. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, dear members of the Dissertation Council, thank you, Tatiana Beliaeva. We are proceeding to the next item.
Sergey Alexandrovich, вы нас слышите?
Sergey, do you hear us? Could you please put on your image on the screen? Okay, dear colleagues, after 1 minute technical break, 2 minutes rather technical break, so we move on. And now I would like to proceed to the review submitted by all the members of the dissertation board. All of the reviews have been submitted timely according to provision 19 of the academic degree awarding procedure in St. Petersburg State University. No external reviews have been submitted, so now we proceed on to announcing the reviews submitted by both the chairman and other members of the dissertation board. And after all the members of the dissertation board have declared their reviews, Tatiana, you have the floor to reply to questions and commentaries. So now I would like to be the first one to take the floor. And I urge everyone to focus on the critical remarks without reading the entire body of their review. So the review submitted by Chairman of the Dissertation Board, Professor Panibratov. Overall, my assessment of the dissertation is positive and in favor of the dissertation. However, there are some critical remarks and matters for discussion. The first one is that in the introduction, the author says that competitive advantages are the key aspect for Russian companies. However, you should have clarified this for small and medium-sized firms. How are those different in terms of their competitive advantages? Which competitive advantages do those need? How urgent are these competitive advantages, and what should these competitive advantages be based on? Possibly those can be different across small and medium businesses. My second aspect, in the introduction, you introduce such a term as strategic orientation. However, it is yet unclear in what way do strategic orientations reflect the overall targets of the company, and how do you distinguish between these two concepts? Third, your fifth hypothesis about financial capital amid economic crisis is not very well justified. Access to financial capital is rather an advantage than a shortcoming. On the other hand, it allows companies to stay less focused on market orientation. Why do you evaluate access to financial capital within the efficient strategic orientation hypothesis? The fourth, you should provide more explanation on some definitions. Those are actually untimely and too late in your dissertation. Overall, these aspects do not invalidate the high quality of this dissertation. It is an original research which is highly relevant and which is very original. The suggested solutions are very well justified and practical. Overall, my assessment of this dissertation is positive, and I believe that Tatiana Beliaeva and her dissertation under the title Strategic Orientation and Performance of the Russian Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises During the Economic Crisis deserves to be awarded the inspired academic degree of the Doctor of Philosophy in Economics in Specialty 080005, Economics and Management of National Economy Management. Tatiana, you can provide your reply. I would like to say a huge thank you to all members of the dissertation board for their reviews, and may I now provide my response to the critical remarks. As for the difference between small and medium businesses on the one hand and larger companies on the other hand, I should mention that larger companies feel not at ease to draw more financial capital. At the same time, they have a simpler structure and are more flexible. In this context, small and medium companies are a promise, because they are highly vulnerable amid crisis, and they can respond quicker than larger organizations. As for strategic organizations and their impact on company performance, I believe that strategic orientation as a key performance indicator reflects my personal awareness of this concept, as well as the fact that strategic orientation allows to describe the overall vision of a company and shape the company choices as well as decision-making process. This concept allows us to distinguish across various strategic orientations performed by companies. Your third question on the financial capital amid economic crisis. Financial capital ensures a successful development on strategic challenges. However, there is ambiguity due to the fact that it is quite often unclear to companies which strategic orientations to reside to amid crisis. As for strategic orientations and the integral company strategy, well, I analyze both individual strategic orientations as well as joint effects of strategic orientations combinations. each strategic orientation can be combined easily with other strategic orientations. Initially, I described each strategic orientation individually, and then I described those jointly, due to the fact that in the same way, practically, strategic orientations used to be studied individually, and only after that were those studied jointly within some integral economic models. Thank you so much, Tatiana. I would like now to give the floor to other members of the dissertation board, and I suggest the following order. We could follow the Russian alphabet: Professor Gavrilova, Professor Rogova, Professor Shereshev, and Professor Anokhin. It is a Latin letter, so Professor Anokhin, if you don't mind, you're going to be the last, so we could start with you, if you don't mind. Okay, let's then give the priority to English alphabet, and let us give the floor to Professor Anokhin. Well, I have two general questions to the defendant. My first question is that of a theoretical nature. Well, the results are very integral and then conform with one another. So you show that strategic orientation has a positive impact on company performance. You also demonstrate that the interaction across various strategic orientation does not always result in the fact that companies have to make choices. This is largely different from what is there in international academic tradition. Therefore, my question is as follows. Theoretically, what is so innovative in your dissertation? Yes, you demonstrated that these strategic orientations are applicable amid economic crisis, and this is all justified. And my second aspect is about your variable. You mentioned that it is subjective. It is the subjective measure of the ability of a company to withstand crisis. Does the choice of this dependent variable is the choice of this variable in conformity with other parameters such as the share of the market, the size of the enterprise, and so on and so forth? In what way does it confirm the theories that you recite to? My overall evaluation of the dissertation is positive. The dissertation is highly practical and relevant, and I had a chance to compare it to the dissertations defended in European universities, and your dissertation is absolutely on par with these dissertations that are defended in Western universities. This is it. Distinguished Professor Anokhin, thank you so much for your report. As for the conceptual remarks, yes, indeed, the hypothesis is more or less identical to what is there in the academic tradition. The strategic orientation concepts can be developed in various contexts. So I decided to focus on more active strategies that would foresee implementation of some innovative, groundbreaking ideas. At the same time, I also came up with some unexpected results on the negative impact of strategic orientation, which is one of the results yielded as a result of my research, and which justifies its innovative nature. I also looked at the specific context, at individual context of Russian companies. I would like to add that my explanation of the results and their comparison across other research approaches was then expanded in a recent paper published in 2018 in International Entrepreneurship and Management Journal. It is an international journal. As for the main dependent variable and its metrics, it is not by chance that I decided to use this parameter. I used a specific metrics, a specific scale developed at the Berkeley University, US. And this allowed me to focus on the company performance and its ability to generate profits. The subjective metrics is the result of my research, and it is quite often in similar papers analyzing small and medium sized companies across various industries. To evaluate the robustness, I did specific tests using subjective and objective parameters, which allowed me to say that the findings obtained are evidence-based. Thank you so much for your reply. Well, just as an extra statement, I would like to say that in the Western tradition, we have several papers published in this field that demonstrate the practicality of various strategic orientation. And this allows you just to jump into this trend and to contribute to this innovative concept, this innovative approach on how strategic orientations interact. This result is very much into the trend of what is going there now in academic tradition. And this is indeed what makes your dissertation so valuable. Because I believe that this can make your dissertation a huge promise, a theoretical promise, I mean. Thank you. Sergey, thank you so much for your high evaluation of the dissertation and for suggesting such a vision. Now I would like to move on to Professor Gavrilov's review.
I like the theoretical constitution of this, of this dissertation. I like works when empirical data at the level of research are interesting, but it's not analyzed properly, and conclusions are not of importance. And this work is unique in that the conclusions are important in both practical and theoretical levels. So we have strategic orientations are intertwined, and I would like these concepts to be interrelated and delineated at the same time. So this is my first remark. I would like to say the second one is that the positive effects of each orientation is described, but at the same time no suppositions about relative effects of orientations, which one of the three can be deemed the strongest, are not there in the report, in the work. Also, when you describe the data and the characteristics of companies, that's paragraph 3.2. 4.1, table 6 on page 60. I would like to see more about the strategic orientation, the comparative study of strategic orientation in Russian companies, whether entrepreneurial market orientation or in education. And in response to your question, I would like to say that market orientation is related to innovations and creating an added value for customer, and then this entrepreneurial orientation is is when the company can assess their orientations and their performance and introduce their new methods. So in terms of the hypothesis, I treat the effect of orientations in that in the literature I haven't found enough information about these effects, and therefore I decided to concentrate on in terms of crisis, and so therefore, as far as the approbation of my conclusions, this was done in several papers, and in terms of the companies, about 35 companies. Well, more companies combine market orientation and education orientation, and there are more. These are more companies than are oriented only at the market or education individually, and so that's 17% there, and so there are other data as well that I mentioned in my work. The next review is by Professor Rogova. I would like to say that I like the work on the whole, but because I like working with data, I liked the empirical part and methodological parts because it was good research and clear-cut, because the formulated hypotheses are very well tied to the study of the empirical data. And I have two questions. The first one is the type of argumentation. We've heard about the three types: market, entrepreneurial, and education orientation. Well, on page 20, we have more types of orientation, and therefore I haven't seen maybe enough argumentation why you chose those particular three out of this list. So I think that this issue needs to be clarified. And the second one, you work with different combinations of orientations, and then you have cross values, etc. So it really complicates analysis. Different methods. There are methods that can assess synergy effects of using different orientations, and there's a table with these different methods, but you use a particular analysis and why you didn't use the other ones, which to me were quite valid. And so, on the whole, I would like to say that your work complies with the requirements of St. Petersburg State University, and Tatiana Beliaeva is entitled to being granted this third degree. In terms of the strategic orientations, the three orientations, why did I choose them? Because of the concept, and why? And because this concept is well developed in management. And there are other orientations to innovations, but they overlap with the orientations that I've chosen. But also because the companies that I studied presented themselves to these orientations better than the other ones, and because the other orientations, these orientations cover different industries, and also the orientation that you mentioned, the other orientations can be used for in later research, and the analysis, the aberration analysis, involves the combinations of two or three orientations, and this is a good method to actually study these combinations. And well, there are structural equation analysis that is good for structural analysis, but also in comparison to other methods, our methods presented a better scope for comparison of different data. Thank you very much. Professor Shershva, thank you very much. I was very interested in your work, and I agree with the opinions of the other members of the Dissertation Council, that all parts of your work are written in high quality. And I like the connection between the empirical part and the theoretical part, and it doesn't happen quite often, and it's a well-balanced paper. And I like the unexpected result that you found, and you have to continue this research. And crisis creates situations where companies find difficult to combine different strategies. In terms of the comments that I have, well, they're on private nature. I would like to have more justification about the financial capital, and why do you focus on that? You've already answered this. And also I would like to ask you about the quantitative analysis. The data is of the year 15 and 16, and maybe it's quite outdated, really, data, for this kind of work, and maybe you weren't able to get more up-to-date data. But I would like to see more concrete recommendations that follow from your analysis of strategic behavior. And so, your recommendations or conclusions, I would say, are of more general support than I would like to see. But I also support the suggestion that the context, the connection of the context, the crisis context, and the performance of companies is key to such research, And I would like to say, in light of what I've said, that Tatiana Beliaeva is entitled to the degree of candidate of economic sciences. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Now I would like to provide my replies. As for the Russian Analytical Center of Small and Medium-Sized Companies support as of 2013 and the survey in 2015-2016, I should note that these data on the regional environment development are the latest ones published by the Analytical Center. Those practicality is that they allow us to analyze the potential of the environment by way of 5 key factors. This indicator is very largely overlooked due to unstable regional policies amid crisis. As for the importance of this indicator and the 2 variables, this was statistically insignificant. As for the recommendations, this chapter describes the key recommendations following the research. The key focus were theoretical justification, which is in conformity with the objectives of the research. The practical dimension is discussed in the conclusion, and I was striving to make it as short as possible. Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Tatiana. Now I would like to open the floor to an open discussion. Everyone wishing to take the floor is welcomed to voice their position, make a contribution, make statements. If anyone is willing to take the floor, please ensure you spend no more than 5 minutes. Is there anyone wishing to take the floor? Okay. As soon as I see that no one is wishing to take the floor and the defendant being so elaborate on all the aspects of the dissertation, with members of the dissertation board focusing so precisely on some specific drawbacks and shortcomings, I think that everything has been exhausted and there's nothing to add more to within an open discussion format. Now I would like to give the floor to the research supervisor. Ensure you do not speak for more than 3 minutes. Distinguished colleagues, well, Tatiana is my honor and glory. She started to do research under my supervision as a master's student, and she was studying at a double diploma program, both in Finland and in Russia. When Tatiana entered the postgraduate department, she was very comfortable to work with. Over the 4 years as a postgraduate student, Tatiana demonstrated her ability to do research, and over these years, she managed to accumulate new knowledge and to produce innovative knowledge on what she has learned. She has both theoretical skills in management, in economics, and she's able to operate these theories to produce original economic models. What's more, Tatiana has expertise in empirical analysis. One of her papers is now undergoing a repeat fellow review. And Tatiana is the main author of this paper, and she uses several approaches and several tools, not only the regression theory. This is something which is worth to be published in such a prominent journal. What's more, we are having another paper in R&R, which is undergoing peer review. Then I believe that our cooperation is going to be long-term, and I'm so happy to have this young scholar who is of a great promise. Thank you so much, Professor Shirokova. Now I would like to announce a 5-minute break for members of the dissertation board to discuss the issue on whether to award the defendant the aspired academic degree. Please switch off the broadcast.
Так,
Okay, we resume the broadcasting. Thank you, distinguished colleagues. So we resume the session, and now it is the decision-making that we have to do following the discussion. It was a very prolific discussion, lots of confrontations, and trying to find out whether this is a very good or an excellent dissertation. Now I would like to put on open voting the issue of whether to award the inspired academic degree, and the resolution of the dissertation board is considered legitimate if no less than 2/3 of the members of the dissertation board have voted in favor, according to the academic degrees awarding procedure in St. Petersburg University. Professor Gavrilos is to vote first. Tatiana, what's your opinion? I'm positive. In favor. In favor. Thank you. Thank you. Next member to vote is Professor Rogova. I'm in favor. I'm in favor to award the inspired academic degree of Doctor of Philosophy in Economics. Professor Cherisheva, now your vote. I'm in favor. Tatiana deserves to be awarded the inspired academic degree of Doctor of Philosophy in Economics. Professor Anokhin, your vote. Of course, I'm in favor of awarding the academic degree of Doctor of Philosophy in Economics, and ultimately, me, Professor Panibratov, is in favor, and the defendant should be awarded the inspired academic degree. Now we have to count the votes. Well, I think we can do it without any extra devices. So the decision is as follows: 5 members in favor, none against, none abstentions. And therefore, it is so decided that Tatiana Beliaeva is awarded the inspired academic degree of Doctor of Philosophy in Economics in the specialty 080005, Economics and Management of National Economy Management. Tatiana, now the floor is yours for the concluding address. Distinguished members of the dissertation board, distinguished members of the audience, I would like to extend my gratitude for your practical suggestions, for your time, for the academic discussion, and I promise I will deliver on all your suggestions. I'm also grateful to St. Petersburg University for the opportunity to have my dissertation developed and to have it defended at this university. I'm also grateful to the Institute of Higher School of Management and the Strategic Management for discussing the preliminary results of my dissertation. There is one person who is crucial for this dissertation, the person who has assisted me on my way, who has guided me, and who was just a benchmark to me. This is my research supervisor, Professor Shirokova. I'm passionately grateful to Professor Shirokova for her professional assistance, for her personal assistance. I'm also grateful to the Entrepreneurship Center and the School of Economics of the Russian Far East Federal University for the opportunity to have my empirical research, as well as companies who participated in my survey. Ultimately, I would like to extend my gratitude to everyone who assisted me on this way. Those are my family, my relatives, for their support, as well as everyone present here for the fact that they invested their time. Colleagues, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much for your attention. Congratulations, Tatiana.